This is the EWN Podcast Network.
Welcome to Late Boomers, our podcast guide to creating your third act with style, power, and impact. Hi, I'm Cathy Worthington.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Join us as we bring you conversations with successful entrepreneurs, entertainers, and people with vision who are making a difference in the world.
Everyone has a story, and we'll take you along for the ride on each interview, recounting the journey our guests have taken to get where they are, inspiring you to create your own path to success. Let's get started.
Hello, I'm Cathy Worthington, welcoming you to a new episode of Late Boomers. I'm here with my co-host, Mary Elkins, and we are pleased to introduce reinvention strategist, speaker, and life success coach, Patti Smith, who will give pointers on what to do when life throws us curveballs or when we're stuck and really need to move forward.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Patti carved a path of success in diverse industries, from the world of fashion and publishing to healthcare, but a profound loss sent her on a different path to helping others. Her book, What Am I to Do Now? Simple Strategies to Navigate the Unknown and Ignite What's Next in Your Life, has helped Patti guide countless people through life's uncertainties. Welcome, Patti.
Great to be with you too.
It's great to have you.
Please tell us about your journey and how you came to a career in coaching others through life's changes.
Yes, I'd love to. Well, I think I had talked to you guys at a conference that we met at, and I was saying that my journey, when I was young, there were two things that really pulled me. One was fashion and one was helping people. So I started my first journey in the fashion industry and eventually evolved to where I am today, which is life coaching and helping people. So I guess all that came full circle since I've been a little girl. That's how I was pulled. But as far as moving from fashion to healthcare and then into what I'm doing now, my older sister was diagnosed with cancer and eventually moved to terminal cancer. And that's when I got out of the fashion and luxury market and went to become a full-time caregiver for my sister. She had two kids and she was divorced. And, our life changed and, everything changed overnight. And she lived with us for about 8 months. And we had her kids part-time. And then when she passed away, something just really shifted in me. And I just knew I had to move forward in a different way. And I was really pulled. I think I was in that world of healthcare for almost a year. And I just learned so much. And I was really pulled to advocacy. I didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, I came from the fashion background, so healthcare was a brand new territory. Mm-hmm. But I just felt really called. And I jumped in, I started networking, and I eventually landed at a few different places, but I landed at an entrepreneurial company. And it was the right place at the right time. And I just felt that was my next. And what was interesting was as I thought that this was my next for a long time, within 2 years, our CEO went rogue and I had to shut down the company. And it's what propelled me to really go into, I embarked on a journey of self-discovery really deeply after that. And that's what took me into personal development. I went to a personal development event. And that's when my whole world opened up and I realized that's where I was meant to be for helping people. And so here I am today. So I've reinvented myself many, many times. Throughout there's little stories and I talk about them in my book, but I feel like we're constantly evolving. And I feel like that question of what's next as we navigate seasons in our life, some might be planned. A lot of them are unexpected and it I think if we stay open and curious, we're supposed to be evolving till we take our last breath.
Well,
See,
that's
that's
interesting. You,
exciting because so many people that we're all evolving don't follow the next step or they don't move to something new. And you kind
right.
of followed how you were being called. And most people ignore that little voice.
Your insight and your
Yeah.
intuition. But
Uh-huh.
and I was actually going to ask you a little bit about your book because you have such great quotes in it. And I remember the one that Ella Fitzgerald said, but which she said, it's not where you come from, it's where you're going that counts. And on that topic of what's next, go ahead and tell us what you think it is. What does it look like? How do we know?
I think, it's interesting. As a speaker, I talk on reinvention and self leadership. And, I feel like we need to be leaders of our own lives. And there's a story that I love to tell. It's from a movie. It's one of my favorite holiday movies, and it's called The Holiday. And it's where a woman I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, Kate Winslet is in it. And her and Cameron Diaz switch homes for the holidays. One's in England and one's in LA, and it's because they're both going through broken hearts. And so Kate Winslet is in Beverly Hills, and she ends up meeting the neighbor who's an Oscar-winning writer. They're having dinner, and he's talking about her woes of why she's there. And I love this line. He says, "Iris, in the movies we have the leading lady and the best friend. You, I can tell, are a leading lady, but for some reason you're behaving like the best friend." And she looks at him and she says, "You're right. You're supposed to be the leading lady of your own life." And I just love that because I think we're supposed to be leaders of our own life. And that constantly changes and evolves. And sometimes it's, like we go through divorce or we have loss. And we are meant to continue to navigate that. And I think if we stay curious, like I have a 7-step system called Ignite You. I use the acronym Ignite You.
We're going to
And the
ask you
first
all
is,
about that.
yes, well, the first is about imagination. And I think, imagination is a powerful tool. And when we're young, we use it the way we're supposed to, which is in service of what we would love. And I think as we get on in life and experience things, we use it more to terrorize ourselves of all of the, oh no,
Yeah.
and it paralyzes us versus using it to inspire and ignite us. And so I think it's really going back to when you were a kid and, the world was your oyster. And even though we have different seasons and it looks different throughout those different seasons and the reasons why, and sometimes it's just because we're bored and, maybe we retired and it's like we didn't think about what was next, or maybe we've suffered something really difficult. But as long as we're breathing, we're supposed to be evolving. And I want to bring up one story because it really was profound for me. And it kind of went on while I was in the middle of writing my book. And it's a story about my dad. My dad was 87 years old when my mom passed away, and it was fairly quickly. It was within a year of her going into early stage dementia and then late stage dementia. And my mom was the social calendar. My mom was the one who was, she did the cooking, and my dad did other things. He kind of had an adventurous spirit, but she was more extrovert. He was more introvert. So when my mom passed, I mean, they had just celebrated 60 years together.
Wow.
And I have never seen my dad, this strong man, so heartbroken. I mean, he was broken. My sister and I were like, whoa. And 3 weeks after my mom passed, my brother's daughter, was about to graduate from college the next year, 3 weeks after my mom died, she was killed in a tragic accident.
Oh,
And my dad was like, first of all, our family was devastated. We were at a funeral 3 weeks after my mom's. But my dad's like, I don't even know what I'm going to do with this because I haven't processed your mom. And my younger sister and I are like, he's not going to make it. And what was interesting is within a few months, he called me because he lives in Michigan. I'm in LA. But he said, Patty, I've made it. This is at 87. I've made a decision. I can sit here and feel sorry for myself and make excuses and just wait to die, or I can, and these are his words, reinvent myself. And I've made a decision to reinvent myself. And I was like, okay, what's this going to look like? And who is this man? And you know what
Yeah,
he
and who
did?
took my dad? Where'd my dad
Yeah.
Exactly.
go?
Well, and
Yeah.
like we all have different seasons of what maybe a reinvention is, but for him at that point, you know what that looked like for him, because he was outside of his comfort zone, and that's where that reinvention occurs. You know what he did? He pulled out my mom's recipe book, and he literally started to teach himself how to cook. And my mom would not believe that, but he would. And then he started like, oh, I don't care if it doesn't turn out, I'll try it again. And then he started making different things. He's bringing it to church, and the women at church love, oh, there's the lemon blueberry bread that Don made. And he just got him engaged. And then another thing he did, which was so uncomfortable, my mother always wanted him to volunteer at church. And he said, that is not for me, that's for you. Started volunteering at church. And it was not easy, but he said if he did not put himself around community with his personality, it would be easy to very much contract. And
Yeah.
so to see somebody who suffered two losses so close that within months literally make a decision where he just, this is what I'm doing. He put himself out there, and he didn't know what he was doing. But I mean,
At
he just
87.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
he's introverted. So I mean, I literally was blown away, and it was just another,
So
it
good.
just showed me that it really is a choice. You
Mhm.
always have a decision when things happen, or when we feel like we're not, like a lot of times people, I think women sometimes, as in our second act, and say we're even working or involved in work, we start getting, even if we're very accomplished, you start feeling stagnant, like what's missing. And I think that we go from, you know, we're searching for purpose and fulfillment. And so we're looking more for purpose driven success in our second act, rather than just focusing on, success like when
Oh,
you're younger and you're.
I wanted to ask you about that because boomers often face uncertainty about what to do after retirement, or
Yes.
perhaps they're experiencing empty nests or health issues. So, how
hmm
do we shift our mindsets and move forward?
The very last chapter in my book, I talk about living vision driven versus condition driven. And the very
Mhm.
first thing that when I work a lot with women, and the very first thing I ask them, but this applies to men and women as my book does, is what would you love? Not what do you think you can have or what sounds practical, but like what pulls you. And it's not necessarily always like it's got to be a career, or it could be philanthropy. What kind of things touch your heart? Or maybe there's hobbies like you love painting, but it's not something you've done in a while. Or maybe there's something new. It's really about coming back to when you were a kid, saying, what's something that interests me?
Mhm.
And start, and not being afraid of it's got to be, I've got to be good at it. It's, you think about it, life is about learning. And you know ref like I the mindset piece is so important, because we learn by doing. And think about it, when you try something new, it's probably, you're going to fail first. And so what, we learn to walk by falling down. Feedback, right? We didn't not become walkers. We didn't know any better. We just kept trying until we walked. We learned to drive by trial and error. You've kept failing, but you want to have that independence and freedom so bad that you're willing to get through being afraid. And
Yeah.
I think when you go after it, when I say vision driven, that's looking at what ignites your heart and soul versus looking at your conditions around you, like, oh, I'm too old, oh, I don't feel great. Like, it's wherever you focus, where your attention goes, energy flows. And if you're always
Mhm.
looking at
Oh,
why you can't, then you won't. But if you're looking at it from the eyes like a kid, like being curious, it is amazing what you can do. And I really believe that you were just getting started, especially women in their second act.
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
I think, you know, if you have a family or even aging parents, life becomes about you're stretching yourself so much. And I think once your kids get older and maybe you're not working the grind like you were before, so much can open up for you, but you've got to stay curious and and and
Mhm.
really get clear with what you would love. It's funny when I work with women, and the first thing I'll ask them is, you know, so what is it that you're looking for? What would you, I love saying, what would you love? Because it's different than what would you like. And you know what they always tell me? Every time they tell me what they don't want.
Oh.
And that wasn't the question. It was, what would you love?
That is not
We
the question.
know, yeah, we know what we don't want, but have we spent much time? And when I keep, okay, we know what you don't want. And when I keep, back into that question, you know what lots of times happens? I was blown away when I first started working with women, but then it became kind of normal. I don't care what kind of personality they have, almost every time there's some kind of tears. And they're like, I can't believe it. Why am I crying? And I'm like, because you're touching a part of yourself that you haven't let yourself,
Mhm.
connect with in a
Yeah.
long time at that level. And, that's what I'm passionate about is, you know, just igniting that aliveness in you and just
Mm.
going for it because we don't know how long we have. I
We
lost
don't.
my niece at 21, my sister at 50, and my mom at 82. So we don't know when our last breath
Mhm.
is. And so
Yeah.
that's why I say if you make it a habit of living vision driven, letting your vision of what you're curious and what lights you up pull you rather than your conditions, and the more you make that a habit, the more it will become a habit. And that's looking at the glass full
Ah.
or half empty. Same concept.
That's interesting. Well, talk about, you mentioned it a little earlier, the Dream Builder and the 7-step Ignite You system that helps people l- brighten their lives up. Talk about these systems and how can they help us define our goals and our needs further?
Sure. Yeah, the system that I take people through, and it's in my book, it's called, I use the acronym IGNITE and then the letter U. And it's really because that's the question is, okay, how do I even begin? Right. I haven't even thought like that in a long time, or maybe something that really pulled you into not a easy, like a great place. It's just hard to get motivated, right? And so I take them through the steps. And the first is, and I won't get heavily into it, but just to kind of go through them, first is inspire your imagination. And that's what I've been talking about. What would you love? What turns you on? What is just interesting for you? And even think back to things that maybe you haven't done in a while, but things that made you happy, things that just sparked, get you up in the morning, put it that way, right? Um, because your imagination is really what is the beginning of what fuels transformation. And
Mm.
then the second is get clear with what you want and why. And that's because clarity is power and specificity is key because
Mm.
we need to be specific about what we would love. Use the internet as an example. If you're looking up a good restaurant, right? And if you just put a nice restaurant in Los Angeles, tons of restaurants will show up. Then if you
Mhm.
say a good Italian restaurant, what if you said a good Italian restaurant that serves gluten-free pasta and is in West Hills, California? The list gets a lot clearer and more succinct. And that's
Mhm.
why when people say, I want to be happy, well, what does that mean? And I like to say, look at it like a photograph when you went on vacation. You had lots of memories, but you can look at a photograph and you remember, oh, I was in this place and I was feeling this way. And, maybe you were with a significant other or with a bunch of girlfriends or whatever it is. And you describe the photograph. That's when I get specific about what would be an idea of something that would fill you up and be specific. Because when you're specific, then when you're wanting to take actions, you're clear with where that is because we need to have a direction, a vision that pulls you. And then the
So
why,
these are how the steps work
well,
and how
this is
we're
to get clear
connecting
with,
with them.
yeah,
Yeah.
use your imagination and then get clear. Okay, what kinds of things would you love? And then let me zone in on what are the things that really light me up, and let me be specific. Like, what does a happy day look like for you? Or what would be, in a year, what's something I would love to be doing? Maybe it's writing a book, maybe it's painting, who knows what it is. Maybe it's, getting involved in philanthropy. Well, what kinds of things touch your heart? Get really specific. And then, the why is, well, why is it important to you? Because when you have a strong why, it grounds you. When you're moving forward with your vision, the why is what will keep you grounded when maybe you get distracted, or maybe, you mention something about it to somebody and they're like, are you crazy? You're too old for that. But if you know why something's important to you, that's going to be your anchor. So that's the second step. And then the third is nail down your decision to go for it. Like when I shared the story about my dad, he made a decision, because decision, leads to progress, and it's putting your stake in the ground and committing. I am doing this, and, I'm closing the back door on maybe, and it's happening. I don't know how it's going to happen, but it's going to happen, because I think people get caught up in how, and when they can't answer how, they give up. You put the how on hold, because you don't need to know how, you just need to know what. And then that, then will lead into the action. So the decision is important once you're clear. And then once you're moving forward with your decision, the next is invite and support of like-minded people and mentors. And this is where community and mentorship are so important. Sandra Yancey, we all know her, CEO of Key Women. She has this quote, and I love it. She says, "Your dream comes from inside you. Your success comes from who's beside you." And that always makes me tear up, because she one of her main pillars, her values is, and it's my favorite one, lift as you climb. And I love that, because we can only do so much on our own, but when you have support, when you have a community, you can move mountains. And it's just so important to be around people that are going to maybe help you stay accountable, because it's hard to see the picture when you're in your own frame, right, of your life. But you want the support of accountability, but yet people that help you, support you in moving forward. And they're not telling you, oh, you're too old, or who do you think you are? You're not educated enough. They're there to support you because they see how it lights you up. So that's, I think, support really helps. Success grows with support. It really does. And then T is take inspired action every day, because nothing happens unless you act. And I will quote Sandra again. She takes the acronym ACT, and action changes things. And it's so true. And that's where, I was telling you guys, we learn by doing. And, don't be afraid to fail, and reframe failure as feedback. And John Maxwell, I have this quote in my book, the quote, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. He says, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, is the quote. He says, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. And I love that, because evolution or evolving is always about learning. And we're going to try new things, and it's exciting, but it's okay if we look foolish doing it. I mean, that's what
they always tell us
growing.
to frame our failures as learning experiences.
Absolutely.
You're learning
Absolutely.
when you fail, and you're not learning when you don't fail.
And winning too. It's a learning experience. What could I have done a little better? Even if you win.
Well, and I think sometimes people, like when I'm working with people with, making changes and moving and growing, you can be, sometimes people get so stuck in the learning, like they're always reading things and going to seminars and all this. But until you apply what you're learning, it's, I think it's Einstein that has a quote that knowledge really comes from experience. I mean, knowledge is okay. It's nice. It's good to have knowledge, and we need knowledge. But if you're not going to apply it, what's the point in having it? And so, and you're going to fail when you're trying new things. And then the E in the system is embrace gratitude throughout your journey, because I think gratitude grounds and empowers. And, when you make gratitude, because gratitude is an instant shifter. I think if you're having a bad day or even a challenging moment, if you think of something you're grateful for, it's an instant energy shift.
I can't
And
tell you how many of our guests have said that on this
Yes.
podcast.
really,
Pretty much every single one.
Well,
because
a lot. Yeah.
because what you focus on expands and what you ignore contracts, right? We know that. So if you're focused on gratitude every step of the way, even when your family, like you bring yourself there, it literally is an instant energy shift. And I think you make that a habit, and a grateful attitude truly becomes a grid through which you perceive life.
Even
And
if it's something very small that you're grateful for, the relief
Yeah.
of
yeah,
a bud on a flower. Yeah.
And we've had
well,
people say, be grateful for running water in your house, or
Yes.
any kind of thing like that we never think about. But when you zero in on it, it shifts you a little bit.
it does. It is an instant energy shift. And I think, sometimes people go, well, what if you've just had, they'll bring up the worst scenarios of somebody's life and all that. And it's like, you know what? If you're breathing, you have something to be grateful for, because you have a
Yes.
shot at something, even if you're fully handicapped. Look at the stories of handicapped people that, there was a story about a guy who played a guitar for the Pope. This was years ago. And he didn't have arms. And he literally played it with his toes. And it was just such a marvelous story, because I thought, there's when you're taking action, I always like to look at it this way. What's one thing you can do from where you are with what you have that will move you forward? Just what's one step? Could
I
be a
like
phone
that.
call. It could be a seminar. It could be taking a class. There's always something you can do, and you don't have to have it all figured out. And then
Yeah.
the last step is unite with the new self-image. And this one I added in before
I
it was
want to
my.
ask you about that, because why create a whole new self-image? So, and how do you do that?
Well, to me, I think that ties in the whole idea of reinvention, because, life is really a lively process of becoming, right? We're always becoming. I mean, the universe is a spiral universe, right? It's constantly nudging us towards our full potential. And even our DNA is a spiral. It's a spiral of becomingness. We're always becoming that next best version, if we allow ourselves to continue to evolve. And, Maxwell Maltz, he was a renowned plastic surgeon, and then he wrote a book, Psycho-Cybernetics, and he really studied the self-image, because he used to, redefine people's faces, and a lot of them were things with the nose and all that. And he said accidents, and he was from the 40s, and he was marveled at how some people, he, fixed them up, and they would, suddenly feel amazing. They didn't feel so bad anymore, that they looked great. And then there's other people, he would do the same thing. And what he found is they would look at themselves when he was done, and they would say, I don't see any difference, because they still viewed themselves as, having some deformity, even though physically it was not there. They still had the image. And so in their mind, they were still broken somehow. And so he did a great book he wrote called Psycho-Cybernetics. And he said, I love this. He said, you can never outperform your own self-image, how you see yourself. You can't outperform, no matter what people tell you, it's how you believe. But you can absolutely change it, because who you believe yourself to be is who you become. It's really, people can say, oh, you're so smart, you're so beautiful, you're so talented. But until you believe that for yourself, it doesn't matter.
Well, speaking of that, how do we break through mind blocks? And how do we align ourselves with a vision-driven life?
Well,
and not get stuck like that?
Well, to start off, we need to have a goal to work towards. We've been designed that way. We're goal driven. So that's your vision. That's when you sit in the, what would I love? So you want to have something to work toward. And then that's why I have that system. I think it's important to have at least one person. It doesn't have to be a whole group, at least one or two people. And I call them a partner in believing, and whether it's a mentor or somebody that you know that will support you. Because sometimes, when we're feeling a little challenged, if you've got that group or that one person at least, they're there to help you and you're there to help them when they're not feeling so great, right? So having some kind of a community or at least a partner in believing, and that's what, working with a coach can look like. But, plenty of people are even in little mastermind groups. And that's really what that's about, is to help each other out. I talk about, a lot of stuff is like using your fear as fuel. A lot of times people stop because they're doubting or they feel like they're going to look stupid or they're afraid, right, of who knows what. But, we get crazy in our mind with our imagination. And I always like to say, just like reframe failure as feedback, I just say use your fear as fuel, because most of the time, if you're in danger, then we're supposed to, our immune system shuts down. So when you go into fight or flight, and that is to give you all the energy to get out of harm's way. That's what happened, in the caveman times, right? Something's chasing them, but we aren't meant to live there. And most things in life are not a matter of life and death like that. They're in our mind, and we put the fear. And so I just say, unless you're in grave danger, which is not that often, take whatever you're afraid of and, call it what it is. It's like, when I was in a coaching program, they said, befriend your fear. So it's not like you're not going to be afraid when you're trying new things, but rather change the perception of what you see fear as. It's like, you know what, this is good news, because if I've got some fear in me, then that means I'm heading in the right direction, because I'm pushing myself outside of my comfort zone. So, to not be afraid of it, but rather realize that it's telling you that you're moving in the right direction. And unless there's something that's really a life and death situation, which is rare, it's just a matter of taking fear and not using it as an excuse. And I say, don't be a victim, because when you're a victim, you literally are giving up. You're using everything as an excuse. And rather than being, you can either be on a hero's journey or a victim's journey. And so, you talked about, Cathy, you were talking about emptiness, right? So when I wrote my book, AARP called me, and they happened to do this article on empty nesters. And so it was interesting because, and it ended up being one of their most read, downloaded, shareable articles. The woman that wrote the article, she interviewed a few of us that had written books that she thought applied. But the thing she took from mine, and I really believe this to be so true, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, or, just the younger generation looking at, our generation and forward, they're looking at us. It's not as much what we say when they're adults. It's different when they're kids. Yes, they listen to us, but they're watching us. And I thought of that because I recently became an empty nester right when I was publishing my book. And I thought, you know what? It's not what I say to my daughter. She's watching me. And I saw that because when I wrote my book, I couldn't believe, she was shocked, and she started looking at me so different.
She didn't know you were writing one.
She didn't. I didn't tell her. And then one day during COVID, she came in my room and I'm like, I'm trying to write the book, finish this book. And she goes, you're doing what? And I thought, oh no, I have to finish this now because I want to be a role model for her.
A leader. You wanted to be a leader. Talk about that a little bit. You brought it up earlier about what it means to be a leader. So, but how does that help us navigate to new challenges ahead?
Well, I look at being a leader, and I think most people think, oh, a leader is somebody who's in charge, right? But I think, just like I brought up the story about being the leading lady of your life or the leading man of your life, if you think about it, we are all supposed to be leaders of our own life. And I think the leading yourself is the foundation of leadership, because true leaders, great leaders, are good role models, right?
Mm-hmm.
They walk their talk. There are those people that say, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I haven't done or I'm not willing to do. And I think in life, if we look at the younger generation, I feel they're in desperate need of more good role models. And
Mm-hmm.
best way we can role model to our kids, to our grandkids, anybody around us, is by how we show up. And so to me, that is a constant reminder, because, when my sister passed away, we cared for her. My daughter was only 7. And I'll never forget the day my sister died. And I had my daughter go to school. We didn't tell her she died. We closed the bedroom door. And when she came home from school, I sat her down and I told her, that her aunt passed away. And, I couldn't believe what this little 7-year-old said to me. Her first words were, she said, because my sister had 2 kids. She said, Mom, what are those kids going to do without their mother?
Oh, gee.
And I thought, wow, I can't believe a 7-year-old just said that to me. But I realized that's what she was looking at. And it really, after that, it always got me thinking, like, I want to be the best role model for her and for my niece and nephew. I'm not going to do it perfectly, but I think we can all be, especially us that are in our second acts of life, some way, shape, or form, how we treat other people, how we move forward with our lives. Our kids and the next generation, they watch us. It's how we fail too. It's not being perfect, but we can show them how we navigate loss, how we navigate divorce, how we navigate getting fired, or how we navigate, just being lost and trying to figure it out. And to me, I think that's why we need to continue to evolve and show them how life is lots of different seasons, and reinvention looks different at all these different places of our life. And that's, to me, what ignites our heart and soul, is what's going to continue to move us forward. Because, everybody's got stories, and some of them are not easy. And we go through seasons of difficulty, and you either are going to let your excuse lead you, or you're going to let your vision lead you. And I would say that it's more fun living vision driven than it is condition driven.
You talked about fear and the power of fear and using it to empower you. It's when people are afraid, it's the least empowering thing ever, because they don't know what to do, and they don't know if they are facing something that will ruin their lives or have them move forward. What do you say about that?
You know what? I would say, first of all, when you first are challenged with something, allow yourself to process it, because you're human. Sometimes you've got to meet people, like, even if you're talking to somebody, you meet them where they're at, because, you need to process an emotion, or you need to process going through something. But then I think there's that point where you say, okay, enough. And, that what's one thing I can do from where I am with what I have? Maybe that one thing is, I can't do this on my own. Maybe that one thing is reaching out to somebody who you admire, or who you think can at least help you get out of that headspace so you can get to that next place. But at the end of the day, only you can do that for yourself. And that's why, honestly, this idea of living vision driven, if you've got something that's pulling you forward, right? My dad lost the love of his life. He was 87 years old. And then his granddaughter, he was 87. You could understand if he gave up, right? Both of those things going on. And
Yeah.
yet he didn't, because he decided, okay, if I'm on this earth, I'm going to have to, if I want to stay here, then I've got to move forward. And it really is about moving forward, always forward. My nephew, who lost his mom, he got a tattoo on his back, and it was always forward. And he said that was to remind him just that no matter what happens, I can always move forward. And that always
It's
stuck with me.
interesting because you can't read a tattoo that's on your own back.
I know. And yet I think for him, it was about pushing him forward, like knowing that that was there and that it will always push him forward. And,
Really
you know,
interesting.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's why I said it is important to have some community. And if you don't, that's why you've got to go out there and look. If there's that one person you can call, or, that's what sometimes working with, like I said, a coach would be, is helping you to get to that place. That's why I wrote the book. So people can go through a process. I have questions at the end of each chapter, along with where my system is, where you can start making notes of things that are hitting you as you're reading them, and to get you out of that headspace.
Good idea.
You're either going to go forward or backward. It's the glass is half full or half empty again. So do you want to put on, a vision-driven lens and move forward, or and you can't stay still, because what happens with stagnant water, right? It starts getting yucky. And I mean, we're meant to move forward. We're energy. We're meant to be moving, and we're meant to continue to evolve. And I call it your what's next evolution, because we're supposed to be evolving till we take our next breath. Let your curiosity move you forward. Think about what are the things that are just interesting. Go on a walk. You get out in nature and it feels good. Maybe exercise makes you feel good. Try a class out. There are so many things out there. Volunteer for something that really touches your soul. You like animals, volunteer somewhere like that. You like helping people. There are so many opportunities out there. Get curious. You don't have to have the answer like this, but I think we don't take the time to really just slow down and say, okay, what would I love? I mean, I would say start with that question. What would I love? What are things that make me happy?
Well, I was just going to ask you what advice you'd give our boomer audience and all the others as a takeaway today. And you just gave several little bullet points. Anything else you want to leave them with a takeaway?
I would say this: no matter where you are in life, no matter what you've been through or what you're going through, you matter. The very beginning of my book starts with that. You matter. Because if you're on this earth and you're breathing, there's a reason. And I feel like that we have within us the capacity to continue to evolve in ways that we will feel the purpose and the fulfillment that we're looking for. And we have to trust that, but you've got to get quiet. No one can answer that question for you. No one can make you happy, because they're not you. And to trust yourself enough to know that you've got the answers. The quality of your life is really determined by the quality of question you're willing to ask. And you want to learn how to ask those kind of questions, like, what would I love, instead of complaining about, how bad everything is, or how, there's nothing, more worth doing. There's always something. There's something that will light you up, but you make the decision. I would just say this: am I going to be vision driven or condition driven? Which way do I want to live? And if it's vision driven, then stop the excuses. Another Sandra Yancey quote: when you lose your excuses, you find your results. And actually, if you're not happy with your results, then that kind of gives you a clue to how you've been thinking. So,
yeah, we manifest everything we think about.
That's great.
We become our thoughts.
We do.
We become our thoughts.
What we think about. We really do. Yeah. I mean, we could do a whole nother podcast about that. But, at the end of the day, I just, if anybody's interested in the book, it's on Amazon.
Hold it up farther. There.
It's on Amazon. And, or you could go to my website, which is pattysmithcoaching.com. Patty's with an I. And, and that's why I wrote the book. So it's If people just go, I don't know where to begin, I would just suggest get the book
That's
and
great.
go through the book and take notes in the book. And the whole point is to get you started. That's why I wrote
That's
the book.
That's great. Thank you. You've given us such great advice. Our guest today on Late Boomers has been Patti Smith, life success coach and author of the empowering book, What Am I to Do Now? And I won't go over the rest of it unless you'd like to, Patti. You can reach Patti through her website, pattismithcoaching.com, which is what she just told you. And that's Patti with an I. And download her gift of 11 powerful affirmations that spark your awesomeness factor. And Patti, is there anything else you'd like to say?
You know what? I just want to dovetail on the awesomeness. That's a word I use a lot, is awesome. And I used the word awesomeness as an acronym. And my idea, I think it's kind of my fashion background, was, every day when we get up in the morning and we get dressed, right, you're thinking about, what am I going to wear? What am I going to put on? And I thought, wouldn't it be great to put your awesomeness on every day? And the affirmations, I say, look at the awesomeness creed and see what's speaking to you and put that on before you go out the door in the morning.
Well, definitely
That's good advice.
Download her affirmations from her website, and you will be awesome every day too, right?
Yeah, and thank you for listening to our Late Boomers podcast and subscribing to our Late Boomers podcast channel on YouTube. Listen in next week when you'll meet another inspiring guest, Jeffrey Peterson, who will tell us about building a real estate empire. Complete change of subject. You can listen on any podcast platform, and we do appreciate you. Please follow us on Instagram at I am Cathy Worthington and at I am Mary Elkins and at Late Boomers. Thanks again to Patti Smith, Patti with an I.
Thank you. Great to be with you guys and with your audience too. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on Late Boomers, the podcast that is your guide to creating a third act with style, power, and impact. Please visit our website and get in touch with us at lateboomers.biz. If you would like to listen to or download other episodes of Late Boomers, go to ewnpodcastnetwork.com.
This podcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and most other major podcast sites. We hope you make use of the wisdom you've gained here and that you enjoy a successful third act with your own style, power, and impact.